acknowledge the board. A lot of times they're the unsung heroes. They have huge commitment to the community, to service, to equity, to innovation. The environmental stewards, they are the public stewards. They are the ones ensuring that everything is done with equity lens, with the transparency lens, with the fiscal lens. I've learned a lot. I'm honored to say that I've worked with them. I've worked with all the board members, and they are the greatest in advocating for the community and for the environment and for service to everyone. We're honored today that we have two board members. We have the president and the vice president. That's great. I know in the morning we heard from the vice president, Commissioner Cecilia Cabello. Thank you again for taking care of business and coming back here. And also we have Commissioner James that really came, the president, had a plan for a vacation today, and he had to come in the morning. He was here at 8:30, making sure that he's part of this process, because really he was the champion behind the efforts here to move the Tree Summit forward. So it takes me, I'm very honored today to welcome and introduce to you a champion, I think, of the neighborhoods, a true guardian of the environment. He loves movies, and he's taking care of the movies too, by the way. Our President of the Board of Public Works, Kevin James.
See if I can make this a little easier. There we go. Hi, everybody. Happy Arbor Day. It's great to be here. So I get the honor of introducing our mayor, and over now about to start year 7 together in the administration as we complete year 6. I've had the honor of doing that in a number of different capacities. Today's one of the great ones with our first Tree Summit. Mayor Garcetti, of course, is a 4th generation Angelino and the 42nd mayor of the great city of Los Angeles, born and raised in the San Fernando Valley, the son of public servants and the grandson and great-grandson of immigrants from Mexico and Eastern Europe. Mayor Garcetti's life has been shaped by a deep commitment to the core values of justice, dignity, and equality for all people. The mayor's leadership on sustainability and climate change is making an extraordinary impact both locally and nationally. Mayor Garcetti co-founded the Climate Mayors. That's a bipartisan network of over 400 U.S. mayors representing nearly 70 million Americans from 47 different states. Just 3 to go, sir. 47. Working together to express and build political will for effective federal and global policy action on climate change. He rallied those same mayors and cities across America to adopt the Paris Climate Agreement after the Trump administration pulled out of the pact. 4 years ago, Mayor Garcetti released the city's first ever sustainable city plan with bold targets to build the environment, the economy, and equity. And last week, at his State of the City address, he announced that the city has met or exceeded 90% of our goals on time or early. And on Monday, he will be releasing an update to the Sustainable City Plan. As president of the Board of Public Works, I've witnessed his value for sustainability firsthand. Of course, during the debates in the mayor's race of 2019, we had 42 of them in the primary alone. The mayor advocated for our urban environment. As a matter of fact, it was our first televised debate. I think it was Channel 7, Mayor, and it was Mark Brown asked, "What is your favorite part of the city of Los Angeles?" And Mayor Garcetti said, "The Los Angeles River, the Glendale Narrows, the soft part where the natural habitat exists." And over time during those debates, we learned from him regularly about the riparian trees that are there and just the amazing diverse environments there. And of course, the willow, the sycamore, the cottonwood, and the valley oak. The mayor always talks about our diverse canopy and what we're able to grow in the city of Los Angeles. So I'm grateful that he's joining us today to share his vision on the city's urban forest. Please join me in welcoming our Los Angeles Mayor, Eric Garcetti.
Thank you. Well, good morning, and thank you, Kevin, for your friendship, for your leadership, for your extraordinary work together with Cecilia Cabello, your compañera, who walked here, I assume, from your house. She's a few blocks away. She's still an Echo Parkian. I was an Echo Parkian. And for everybody who has come here today to make history, to mark history, and to look forward towards the history that we want to write. And it's great to be here with Leafy and the Drop. The Drop helped us cut our usage of water by 20%. Leafy's our mascot for, as Adele just told me, not just for our street trees work, but also for cannabis. Is that what you said? No, you don't. Leafy can go either direction if we need to, but thank you. Leafy is very focused today, I assure you. And I'm really proud to be here with all of you. I've been in Grace Simmons. It's great to be in this lodge named after a woman who helped preserve what this is around us. And I could have just as easily in that debate said my favorite place was Elysian Park. Driving in right now, I had a decade plus of memories because my wife and I moved here in 2000, literally about 3 blocks from where we are, and this was my morning exercise route almost every morning, literally coming behind here, walking through this incredible arbor, and to be here on Arbor Day to see some of the greatest trees that somebody had the wisdom to plant, that now we can just bask under and see. I think all of us know what that spiritual feeling is, to see and to understand and to reflect on a place that's not just defined by its great weather, but the way the weather brings us back to nature. I see Glenn Dake in the back, who when I was a council member, he and I worked as my environmental deputy, green deputy, the first in city council history at that time. Now it's de rigueur, which is good. We wanted to work ourselves out of green stuff being special and instead having it be a value. But where we took the then oak ordinance and expanded it to 3 more native trees, to the bay tree, to the sycamore, and to the black walnut tree, to preserve the native trees that were here. And so many decades and years of work that we celebrate here today. And I want to brag a little bit about our city family, because this was really the brainchild of our collective city family. Kevin James, that I mentioned, and Cecilia Cabello. Adele, who I knew was the right guy for the job, moved him from sanitation, but had been not just nationally, but internationally lauded for his environmental work around water. And if you want to understand trees, you have to understand water. If you want to understand water, you have to understand trees. And the focus that you have put on that and combating climate change, from everything from our cool streets, our cool pavement, which is a big part of our sustainable city plan, where we're testing that. We're seeing a 25% difference in just the heat coming off of the streets. And the Bureau of Street Services Urban Forestry Division, who, let's be honest, faced some tough times during the recession, but that we are dedicated to rebuilding, to reinvigorating and strengthening to new heights in the years to come. And I also want to thank everybody who's come from out of town, whether you come from Santa Monica, which I know is really far away. A couple of you have come, Rick Cole, who helped start some of our sustainability work early on in the administration, from neighbors in Beverly Hills, but also more exotic locales like San Francisco, Honolulu, Portland. Taken together, we really have so much to learn from each other, even as we have different microclimates. The U.S. Conference of Mayors will be meeting in Honolulu this June, and it's a great time to come together, and I know that this is one of the topics that we'll be looking at. There was snow in Kauai this year. There was spent by FEMA in the last 2 years as much as we spent in the last 27 years in this nation. So climate change is real, it's costing us, and we have an opportunity not just to save this earth and protect our communities and our cities and our families, but to do the right thing for our economy as well, which is why stay tuned. But on Monday, when we release the LA's Green New Deal, the update of our Sustainable City Plan, which 4 years ago connected the economy and the environment to sustain them both, we really have a lot of great things to celebrate together. And we feel it all around us, whether it's flames in the hillsides near us, floods on our streets and in other cities, kids that breathe toxic pollution. We might be 90% better than we were when I was growing up, but we're still the worst ozone in America of any urban area. There's a lot of good ideas being thrown around, but we too often forget that some of the most skilled foot soldiers aren't people. They are trees in this fight that we have. And Los Angeles is a hard-working city, but nobody works harder, as Leafy will tell you, than our trees, right? From copses of coast live oaks to the western sycamores that line our boulevards, our urban forest cools down our streets in the summer. It stores that water during droughts that we need, that falls in the winter, and it blesses us with incredible bursts of of color in the spring. Trees clean our air. They increase our property values. They save energy by giving shade to buildings that would otherwise be running the air conditioning on much higher levels. But for too long, I think our trees haven't gotten the top billing that they deserve. So that's the purpose of today, is to breathe life into the lungs of our city once again. And that's why, for the first time in our city's history, we will execute an urban forest management plan that will direct our city's efforts to grow and protect trees for generations to come, with neighborhood councils, with some of our great environmental organizations, with folks that have been pushing this. We put a report together that recommended that this happen, and that's why my budget that we're releasing for, the City Council has it now, but that will start on July 1st, will finally restore LA's urban forestry division to pre-recession levels. And it's time to do that. These are the incredibly skilled arborists, the tree surgeons, the maintenance crews, jobs that will help bring our emissions to new lows and power our economy to new highs. We're also going to have the first CFO. Now, this is not a chief financial officer, the first chief forest officer in this city's history, who will oversee the largest urban forest in America and be responsible for bringing Angelenos up to speed about how important they are. Trees are our best neighbors, but we have to understand them. I know that we can plant lots of trees and watch them die if we don't tend to them. We can see generations plant and then others skip it because those trees are growing up, and then suddenly we get to the end of the life for many trees like we're experiencing now. Deal with an increasingly dense city where we have to abide by ADA standards, and we have opportunities to make sure those don't have to be in conflict. But when we unveil my Green New Deal on Monday, I plan to double down on our goals to expand LA's green canopy. So over the next 3 years, we will plant and keep growing 90,000 trees across Los Angeles, and in doing so, create 2,000 good middle-class jobs in the process. And we'll be rooting them in the neighborhoods that have been the most impacted by high emissions and by high temperatures, because I think those communities that bear the burden of our environmental degradation, often communities of color, lower income communities, communities next to our port, next to oil wells and other things, those are the ones that we want to focus on disproportionately first. And we want to make sure we grow their tree canopies by at least 50% in those areas. Whenever we fly into Los Angeles, you see, or if you take a hike up to Griffith Park and you look down, just how disproportionate our urban canopy is. I live now in the official residence of the Mayor Getty House in Windsor Square, adjacent to Hancock Park, and it's like a green island. It's beautiful looking down on it. And then right around that, it's surrounded by concrete where trees struggle and wither and die. Seniors who are headed to the market on a summer day, this isn't just a matter of something nice, this is something critical. If they walk with no shade, that can be a matter of life and death. We'll also make sure that city policies are all designed so it's not just the Bureau of Street Services' responsibility, but to grow and protect trees on both public and private land. So our planning department, because 90% of our trees are on private land, will be involved and engaged in that. Protecting the health of our urban forest is an environmental imperative, but it's also time to fight back against the disease and drought that has plagued one of our most valuable natural assets. It was one of the sad things I saw walking through this park those mornings, the dead trees that were just sitting there for years after years, nothing being replanted. And we don't always see, the wonderful thing about trees, and I've been a part of a lot of tree plantings just in the arbor here, we don't always see our own beautiful trees grow up in their full lives, but we see somebody else's. And if we don't continue to pay that forward for our children and our grandchildren, they will suffer. When I took office, my theme was trying to get LA back to the basics, and that's what I've really tried to focus on, both city services, our economy, and building an infrastructure for the next 50 years. And that's really what our investment in our urban forest is about. Thanks to a lot of people in this room, we passed Measure M, which was the largest transportation initiative in the nation's history ×2. That's going to extend or build from scratch 15 rapid transit lines in the city. No city's ever done that all at once. But when we think about that physical infrastructure, we have to think about the living physical infrastructure as well. And not just think about it for a year or two. We don't build a subway line to like run for 5 years and shut it down. We should think about trees with that same long horizon as well. So we will still take, an innovative approach, but one that taps our traditional route of literally driving every street in Los Angeles to count every trunk and branch that we have. And when we have a chance to employ cutting-edge technology, we're going to seize that too. So we're working with Google to figure out how new tech tools that are in Google Maps can help us identify and manage that urban forest even better. I can't give you too many details yet, but needless to say, we think it will set a new standard for how we track and measure an urban forest and the canopy of our trees. And there's no question these goals are ambitious, they're audacious. I was just talking to an LA Times reporter about the release of a new Green Deal, and he said, well, a lot of these goals you set are for people who come after you. I said, it's true, but we want to build a coalition that's so strong that whoever occupies my office after me and after that person has to implement those goals. In the same way, when I was on the city council and worked with Mayor Villaraigosa to get off of coal as a 2025 goal, long after he was going to be gone, it's actually 2 years after I will leave office too. But we are going to be off of coal by 2025. So I'm counting on all of you to keep that pressure on my successor and their successor and their successor and so on and so forth. We have our work definitely cut out for us. But that's why you're all here today, to learn from each other. I love the workshop aspects of this. But let's start right now by hearing from some of the folks who have made this happen in their own cities. So I'm going to transition from speaking to being, I guess, an interviewer from up here with these incredible panelists. So let me introduce our amazing panelists that are here today. First, Jen Cairo, who is the City Forester and Urban Forestry Division Manager for the City of Portland. And we love Portland. It's one of the most verdant cities in the world, and certainly in America. One that was defined by the tree industry, the cutting down of timber, but one that is really on the, no pun intended, cutting edge of what we're doing with urban forestry. Next is Kevin Hawker, who is the Urban Forest Manager for the City of Sacramento, who we're really pleased to have here. Somebody who has led with his peers some of the best practices around the country in another great and green area, this time in this state. Stan Oka is here from Honolulu. Look forward to coming to your city later in 2 months. He's the Urban Forestry Administrator for the City and County of Honolulu. Slightly different climate than here, but also blessed with great weather. And Carla Short is the Urban Forester for the City and County of Honolulu as well. So we're doubly strong from Hawaii. And last but certainly not least, Matt Wells, who is the Public Landscape Manager for the City of Santa Monica. Let's give them all a round of applause and thank them for being here as well. So we all know in this room, I'm preaching to the converted, the trees are great for our communities, that much is clear. But people have very mixed feelings about them, if we're honest. I met plenty of Angelinos who are moving trees on their property, or they want to get them taken down in front of their businesses. We see billboard companies in the holidays, when they think nobody is looking, chop trees so that they can get a billboard better exposed. So let me start with Stan and Carla. I want to direct this question to you. What is the public perception of trees in your cities? Because as we look at building this as well, and what have you done to get people excited about trees?
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Oh, I said Carla was Honolulu. I'm sorry, San Francisco. That's no Northern California disrespect at all. Move the microphones closer to you. That often cuts the feedback. And where's the speaker? And if you can point it away from the speakers. Perfect.
I'll go lower.
There you go.
Good morning, everybody. As I would say in Hawaii, kako. Ask me after this what that means. It means good morning. I'm really pleased to be here, invited to this tree set, and thank everybody here and Tim for including me. Really good guy. In Hawaii, you would think that everybody loves their trees. Not everybody does. What we're confronted with is a lot of people that really love their trees. They really love their environment. They really love their yard that doesn't have any leaves in it that they have to clean up. But I see a change in attitude with most people. And it's people that are out there working with us, working with the community groups, and I think that's the way that we have to go. We asked the mayor, Mayor Caldwell, to have a community forestry program. And to my surprise, in the budget this year, he put several positions in there with some money. And we've been really fortunate to be able to work with our climate change, sustainability, and resiliency office. And they've been a big supporter of that and getting the word out. But we think with the community forestry program, working with the communities, and working with other professionals, that's going to change things too.
Carla, obviously in San Francisco, you have, I think, half per capita use of water that we do here, but that's mostly because people don't have backyards. You have much less space for urban forestry. How do you get people excited about trees in a city as dense as San Francisco?
Yeah, we have a number of different approaches. I think the first part of the question, in terms of public perception, is that it's very inconsistent in San Francisco. So we have some neighborhoods where people are really eager for trees, very active and supportive, and then other neighborhoods where people really don't want to deal with leaves. They think leaves are litter, and I'm like, you're right, leaf litter, but they're talking about a different kind of litter. So what we do is we engage with our nonprofit partners. That's a big thing. We have a number of nonprofit partners. Friends of the Urban Forest is kind of the oldest and the biggest. They've been around for almost 4 decades now, and they do tree planting twice a month and get out in the neighborhood working with people in the neighborhood, and that really gives a sense of ownership over trees in their city. We also celebrate Arbor Day. Happy Arbor Day, everyone. We had our celebration in March, and we're able to get a lot of attention for that event. We do a signature tree planting where we dedicate a tree to someone. This year we dedicated to Lawrence Ferlinghetti, who turned 100 years old. Wow. And we had great turnout for that. We got some interest from all over the region because we linked it to a literary hero. And we also go on what we call road shows. So we go to neighborhood groups, neighborhood meetings, and we talk to them about what we're doing, what they can expect, what's coming up in their neighborhood, and try to get people understanding what we're planning to do, as well as excited about the work that we're doing. And we also have we're working on improving our website to make it more user-friendly. We have a lot of information on there, but it's not very user-friendly at this point. So we're trying to improve that and really engage people through that. And then the last, I saw my green card, the last thing I will say is how do we enrage the public? And one thing that we did, which ultimately what helped us pass our ballot initiative, was we transferred maintenance responsibility from the city to property owners and made them take care of trees. And that really was not a popular program, but it highlighted the fact that we had a really inconsistent system and that it wasn't fair and something had to be done.
So engage and enrage. I like that. That's good. That's good. So only about 10%, as I mentioned, of our tree canopy is on public land. But obviously, if we're going to keep an urban forest strong, we need to focus on private land, which you started to talk about just now. Planting and preserving trees on private property is essential. And I mentioned we have protections in place in Los Angeles for some of our native trees that are on private properties. But maybe Kevin and Jen, you can both jump in. How much of your tree canopy is on private land in your cities? And how does your city take care of those trees or incentivize people to take care of those trees? Get closer when that happens. I know it's the opposite. And then point it down. It's probably pointing right at that speaker. There you go. Feedback happens when they can talk.
Let me sit off to the side.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Mayor Garcetti. Great question. So in Portland, private, so way over here.
Yeah, there you go.
Our private tree count is roughly the same as what our public property tree count is. We know that we have about 1.5 million trees on our public properties, and roughly that on our private, we have about 220,000 street trees. Mind you, Portland is far smaller than Los Angeles. We have 700,000 residents, so much more. And how we manage them, I think there's really 4 categories for me to bring up for you, for your reference. First, data. I mentioned that we aren't sure how much of our urban forest is on private property. We're actually completing an urban forestry inventory and assessment with the Forest Service this fall that uses a plot sampling method all over the city. It's really hard to inventory tree by tree private property, so we're using this Forest Service approach, and we'll have good numbers hopefully by December. We also do a canopy study. We repeat it every 10 years. It's based on something called LiDAR, where they fly over and actually measure the types of ground covers. So we know how much canopy extent we have in what areas and where we don't. We also have a target for our canopy levels in the city. That's in our urban forest management plan. So as the city forester, I get to reference that number all the time and say, we're trying to hit this number, help me out here. So we use those data for the second of the four elements, our education and outreach programs. We too have many nonprofit and other stakeholder partners that help spread the good word. We couldn't do that work without all of those partners. We also have our own programs called Neighborhood Tree Stewards. It's a training program that we run in different neighborhoods, 7 classes every year. Those folks go and set up tree teams. Our city has 95 neighborhoods, and 40 of those have neighborhood tree teams. Was that my 1 minute, Ann? Yeah. Thank you. And we do a number of programs, 30 or 40 throughout the year, mostly focused in the low-income, low-canopy neighborhoods, and a lot focused on private trees. Things like how to prune, tree walks. We have a resident pruning program where we teach people to prune trees. We also plant. We offer free yard trees every year, about 800 or so in different neighborhoods, targeted in different areas each year. And the fourth element is regulations. In Portland, private trees are regulated in both development and non-development situations. In development situations, those regulations are a little more flexible, and in non-development, they're more strict. It's generally every tree that's 12 inches diameter breast height or larger that has some type of a permit requirement associated with it. It is not perfect. We have a list of corrections we'd like to make to our latest code revisions, but it's a really good start on that very significant part of our forest.
Okay. Thank you. Kevin?
Well, like Los Angeles, the city of Sacramento has about 90% of their urban canopy is on private property. And like Portland and I'm sure like LA, we have trouble measuring that. It's not like you can just go into somebody's backyard and say, can I count up all your trees? So we use satellite technology and canopy coverage data, and we just recently updated that and learned that we have 19% canopy, and the city of Sacramento has about 100 square miles, so the numbers kind of work out really easily, so that I can tell people that we pushed all our trees together, we have 19 square miles of trees, and we could fit our neighboring city under our canopy if we wanted to, if that were possible. When it comes to trees on private property, we also do offer, through a nonprofit organization, we offer a program to give people up to 10 trees per property at no cost to them, and we work with them to site it so that it has maximum benefits on cooling the house and using less air conditioning. One of the big challenges that the city of Sacramento encountered about 2 years ago when we went through a process of updating our tree protection ordinances was simply defining what trees are going to be protected and which ones aren't. Of course, we wanted to protect everything, but that wasn't going to be possible. And our previous definition of a tree on private property that was protected, we called them heritage trees, and you guys probably have a similar term, but the definition was so vague that nobody knew what was protected. It had a component in the definition about a tree being in good condition. Well, that's debatable, and people debated that. So now it's simply the size of the tree and the species of the tree. Anything on private property that's over 32 inches in diameter is protected regardless of species, and our native trees are protected at 12 inches. And along those lines, in our area, an interior live oak is protected, but a coast live oak wasn't. Well, they look identical. So we just went ahead and protected them both. What we wanted at the end of the day was that somebody can look at the tree and say, is this protected or not? And it would be measurable and objective. Once we set that, everything kind of went into place after that. We do have rules for development. We do have permitting processes to remove trees or prune the trees. But we really had to get over that hurdle of what is protected and what is required. And in the development community, somebody asked me this question, how did the development community respond to this? Well, they didn't send me any thank you notes or anything like that, but they were very appreciative that they understood a clear process. They knew what it was going to cost them to remove a tree if they needed to. They understood which trees were going to be protected, which trees are going to require permits, and then they could plan for that all on the front end of the project and have it all decisions made at the front end of the project instead of finding out, later on down the road.
Yeah, great, thank you. Matt, let me turn to you and Santa Monica, and feel free, anybody else who wants to jump in on this question. In Los Angeles, we have about 1% of our area, where, not surprisingly, it's kind of the wealthiest area, is about 18% of our tree canopy is. And you could probably do the inverse, and the bottom 18%, there's probably 1% of the trees or something similar. How do you plan for that in Santa Monica, and how do you assess those areas that are kind of more tree rich and those that are tree poor, often in your lower income areas, and what policies follow accordingly?
I think, it's a big challenge. Santa Monica is very small in many ways. It's only 8 square miles. It's also, we'd like to acknowledge that my city manager's here, Rick Cole, so there's extra pressure. When we thought about tree planting, and this is ultimately what it's about canopy cover. We've heard about canopy cover already. We've only just really done our first UTC study. It was really important for us to look at canopy cover not only by neighborhood, but also by land use. And even though one of our richest neighborhoods, Noma, has very good canopy cover, when we looked at canopy cover in 2005 versus canopy cover in 2014, we saw that canopy cover had actually dropped at a much quicker level than any other neighborhood in the city. And that was primarily due to development. Supersizing homes? Supersizing homes. And I think it's certainly raised a lot of questions. We've certainly daylighted that issue. And now we're able to give that to our community. I report out to a urban forest task force on a bi-monthly public meeting. We are lucky enough to have an urban forest master plan. We are, Santa Monica, we're very keen on being a sustainable community. So we have various metrics we look at, and this idea of looking at urban tree canopy, but understanding, and I think it's exciting what you say about Google, this idea that we have to keep looking at it, and we have to keep understanding what's going on, what policies are effective, what policies aren't effective. We've certainly learned, or certainly that issue has been daylighted, and now we're using, in terms of our tree planting, to make sure that we are planting trees in the places that are needed. We actually did a tree planting priority program. We looked at 8 different metrics. I worked in urban forestry in New York, and we kind of they looked at it in terms of urban tree canopy, or where we had opportunities for trees, and also population density. But I wanted to kind of do that at a more detailed level in Santa Monica. So we actually looked at 8 different metrics. We looked at the tree resource itself, so we looked at where we could have trees, where we didn't have trees. We looked at age diversity, and we already brought that up about where we had our aging tree population. We know they're all going to be removed at the same sort of time. We looked at environmental issues. We looked at heat island effect. We also looked at where we had pollution levels. We looked at where the freeway was, the airport. And then finally we looked at the human element. We looked at population density, as was done in New York. We looked at where our schools were. We also looked at where our elderly people were living, where we had younger people living, and we also looked at mode of transport. And we took all those things using GIS, threw them against our sort of where we had vacancies to plant trees, and we were using that to guide our street tree planting prioritization program. So those are the sort of things that we've done to make sure we're planting in the right places. But it's a great question.
Impressive. Anybody else want to jump in on this question? Okay. I know you addressed it a little bit before. So let me ask something of all of you. We're obviously feeling the effects of climate change. It's changed fundamentally how we're thinking about the future of our cities, from seawalls in New York to the way that we're looking at deployment of even our firefighters here, now that we have record-breaking fires year after year. And I'm wondering how much this has affected your policies towards trees, the types of trees, obviously the need for trees, that goes without saying, because that will help overall combat climate change, but in a more kind of mid and micro level, how is this changing policies in your cities with rising temperatures, the types of trees, the water retention that you need, et cetera, and what impact does that have? Because like in Santa Monica, if people are building bigger houses, maybe they're able to meet the tree requirement, but it's going to be a smaller tree. it's going to be one that's much less dense and with the kind of huge canopy because there just isn't the space for it with a larger house. But how has climate change affected, for all of you, those sorts of policies of the types of trees and the policies moving forward? You want to jump in? Stan? Go ahead.
In Honolulu, I can speak for Honolulu, not so much for Hawaii. We're looking at different things when it comes to climate change. We're looking at the species that we use, more hardy trees, things that can handle drier air conditions, things that have less problems with disease and insects. And we have to try and get better at what we do and how we do it. The base yard that we're planning, we found out is in an area with 3.5 foot rise in sea level. Will be underwater, so we can't put our base yard there. But we need a new base yard. Our parks are along the street of the beaches, and we're having so much erosion along the beaches. But I don't think you can plant too many trees because we've been having trees fall down because of the erosion, fall down into the water. And so we've had to remove that. In fact, we're planning our tree plantings a little bit further away from the shoreline. So we've been making these kinds of adjustments in our tree planting and our planning for the urban forest.
Other cities? Please, Carla.
I think one of the things in San Francisco that has been in some ways good for the street tree program is we have not historically had to deal with a lot of heat island effect. Our climate is cool in the summer, but that's changing, and we're starting to have some long days, and we're actually getting the attention of the paving program, and they're starting to basically fund some street tree planting through paving programs. We're really trying to push this to allow us to create, as you noted, San Francisco is an extremely dense city. We also have regulations that require we build right out to the property line, which means our street trees have very little space to grow. And so we're really looking at pushing, widening our sidewalks and creating better planting areas for trees, which historically was just a non-starter. But now that people are recognizing the need for trees to, prolong the life of the pavement as we get hotter in San Francisco, we're starting to get a little bit more traction on that front. And then the other thing that we've been doing, which I think is kind of a creative approach to looking at potential impacts down the road for climate change, is our Urban Forestry Council has done some comparative city analyses. So looking at where San Francisco is likely to be in terms of our climate, our temperatures, and we already have a very, very dry months, and looking at what species are doing well and thriving in those cities. And we're looking at adapting our species palette based on that information. So we're trying to be smart about what we plant now for the future as well.
You want to jump in, Matt?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's all about, in terms of climate change for us, it's diversity. Not only species diversity, but age diversity. So we've been very particular in the planning of our urban forest. Again, it's exciting, I think, that LA is looking at their master plan. In Santa Monica, even though it's only 8 square miles, we've actually broken the city into about 400 management units, and we plant and prune at those management unit levels. And we've actually working with the community within our urban forest task force, we have a species subcommittee, and we've selected a primary species and a secondary species per grid segment. And then what we mean by grid segment, it might be a block, 2 blocks, a couple of blocks of the street. And we look at the width of the parkway and also the presence of overhead wires or not. So we then can throw that against the number of planting places we have on those streets, and then we can look at whether we've got we can pre-plan our diversity. So again, we can look at what our urban forests will look in 50 to 60 years' time, and make sure that we will have less than 5% of species, 10% genus at a city level. And I think we're a small city, that would be appropriate. But I would say a word of warning to LA is that I don't think you can look at species diversity at a city level. You really have to look at either a neighborhood level or a community level. Because New York, they were, in terms of citywide, they were looking fairly good. But then you had neighborhoods in, say, Brooklyn that were 42% London plain. I went from London, so I didn't have a problem with it. But other people may have.
Right. Absolutely. I really see, you know, ficuses and palms as our future, so we're going to look really heavily at those two. Anyway, you know, one of the things that my predecessor did, and I joined with him when I was on the city council, and my first internship as a high school student was with Tree People and Andy Lipkiss, and the Million Trees initiative to plant 1 million trees was kind of along those lines. It was all at once, and the ambition was a great one. Andy kind of, I remember, said at one point, it's not how many trees we plant, it's how many we can actually keep going, and how we do that in a sustainable way rather than all at once. So I wonder if any of you have lessons of, you started to touch on it, Matt, but how do you sustain this over time? Because we may get a great surge here, the next recession, which is always right around the corner. You know, the funding, as you heard here in Los Angeles, we don't have a dedicated source of funding for our trees, but how do you sustain, either financially, maybe you guys have some interesting things in your budgets, the way your trees are funded, or in terms of the politics, how do you sustain people's interest over a long period of time in your cities for urban forestry?
I like to think that we keep our city council members, the mayor, involved in a lot of discussions when it comes to trees. We're lucky in that Honolulu's very small compared to LA, and we get to talk to the mayor about issues that we're confronted with. And then, so the next thing I know is he came up with 100,000 trees planting campaign, and I think he meant all at once. And after some discussions, we got it down to, okay, we'll probably shoot for a little bit less, and I think it's a matter of planting trees, making a priority to plant trees, but also give the city the resources that we need to maintain them. Otherwise, what we've done in the past, and I hate to repeat it in the future, is we planted so many trees and wherever we could plant them, and in not too many years, we ended up taking out a lot of these trees. And that was so disappointing for a lot of people, especially people behind the planting, because it's so hard to get them planted in the first place.
Absolutely. Other folks? Kevin, yeah?
The city of Sacramento has some unique sources of funding and also ways that we sustain that, as you said, in sort of how do we get people to buy into that. With the urban forestry program is paid for and funded mostly through a lighting and landscaping assessment, so it's sort of an assessment on each property and it amounts to about, you know, $12 to $20 a property, but it adds up, and the key part of it, it's a sustainable source. It doesn't go up or down, and so it may not be enough, but it really doesn't go down, and it allows us to predict and work with that. Another unique thing that we have going on is that our local utility provider for electricity, the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, they provide our electricity. They have a program where they give trees to property owners in order to reduce the electricity demand and have less air conditioning. And that's funded through the electricity bills. The tie-in to all this is how do we keep that going over time? It's really tied into the identity of the city. We call ourselves the City of Trees. And the utility department, that was all tied into an effort to, they called it their phantom power plant. Instead of building a second power plant, they were going to reduce the usage through trees as a green infrastructure, as a living infrastructure, as you said. And so when you come to people and say, we would like you to give up enough money for, you know, a meal at a nice restaurant once a year so that we can plant trees, what makes them say yes to that? What makes them say yes to that is because it's tied to their identity as a City of Trees, as part of that phantom power plant. It's what we do. And so whatever that equivalent is in your area, you want to look at is, what does this mean to be, you know, to live in Los Angeles? What does that mean in terms of trees?
Good. Thanks. Matt, did you want?
And I can jump in a little bit on the sustainability sort of from the policy point of view. I think that, and again, when the City of LA is looking at their urban forest master plan, is to build in some real-time like metrics that will be driven by the data, particularly if you do the inventory. But Santa Monica, we report out to our community every year on we have different metrics. We have annual metrics, which is species diversity, street tree stocking, which is how many street trees do we have versus how many we could have. We're at 96% at the moment. Also, in the previous year, how many trees did we plant versus how many did we remove? Again, we have a big push on planting, that's okay, but we need to keep up with the removals. So, we try and make sure that we at least plant double what we remove, and we plant at least twice as many as we remove each year, so we have a positive balance on that. 5-year metrics, we look at environmental benefits. We use iTrees, so we're looking at what the function is, how much environmental benefits we're getting out of our urban forest. We also look at our young tree mortality. If all the trees we planted, how many actually survived? We're about like 80%, because people are quick to criticize urban forestry planters. Oh, every plant dies. Right. But unless you go out there and do some research, look at the data, you don't really know that. 80%, some people want to say, well, why isn't it 100%? Well, when we look at what we have and we look at the research, New York, I think it's at 76%, Liverpool and England was like 74%, something like that. So we're well above that. And then finally, we've already talked about it a lot, it's urban tree canopy. That's really the big overall. We do that at the moment we're going to try and do that every 10 years, but I think that's a great sustainability metric as well.
Yeah, good. Do you want to jump in?
Sure, I'll add into that. We don't have a proper marketing strategy yet, but boy, is it on our wish list, one that we make with real professionals in the field. In spite of not having that, we do some efforts to keep this front and center, and one is kind of what Stan was referencing. We try to get in front of our council whenever we can. We're required to, fortunately, in this regard, for certain things, like we have to report annually on certain trust funds that we have, what the monies coming in are, how we're using them, how we plan to use them. We try to maximize those required opportunities in front of council to bring our forestry commission, our nonprofit stakeholders with us, and use that as a takeoff point for giving more information and positive sentiment around the importance of the forest as essential infrastructure with essential services. We take media opportunities. We have a public relations person in our bureau, not in our staff, but we've got him on speed dial, and he jumps in and gets us in front of the camera whenever possible, much as I don't like it. It's a great part of my job in terms of tree outcomes. And we do those outreach things that I mentioned last time consistently, and we don't have a lot of budget, but you can do those relatively inexpensively, especially with good neighborhood partners and community groups engaged, and it's a train-the-trainer type model. Also in Portland, stormwater management fees, sewer fees, are used for tree infrastructure. There was a recent court decision that upheld the authority of the city to do that, so we're actually looking at that more in the future right now. And we're also looking, as the third and final element, at streamlining. Most of the city's forest management and tree service provision is from the city forester's office, but there are still some redundancies and overlaps with other departments. And we're looking at gaining efficiencies and better resource use, since there are limited resources, by some reorganizations that you may hear about in the next year or so.
On that level, and for LA, and we have, I think, some iterations of this that different groups have done, but I'm a big fan of not only train the trainer, but having a curriculum on these things. So we have a civic university that we've done with Cal State Los Angeles. We do a planning 101, we do a government 101. I think we should definitely have a trees 101 that neighborhood councils and others can take, and I think we've had versions of that in the past, but it's a great model, and that definitely sustains. So administrations change, but you have a sea of trainers who are ready to take that next level, and something that needs to be probably tailored to each city, so I think it would be a great thing for LA. But I saw you, Carla, jumping in too.
Yeah. Thanks. I'd love to just say a couple things. So I mentioned at the very beginning, how do we enrage the public? And it's not something that we enjoy doing, but...
oh, come on, you kind of enjoy it a little bit.
Not at all. 3.5 years of very unpleasant work life. But what we really did there was we raised the awareness of the problem. We had a really inconsistent urban forestry program. We had terrible management, but the political side of the house was not really hearing that there was a problem. And so once we did a good job enraging the public, they talked to their policymakers and said, we've got to come up with a better solution. And that better solution was a ballot initiative in 2016. So I like to say that one good thing happened in November of 2016, and San Francisco passed a game-changing...
What else happened? Like, I forget.
A game-changing dedicated funding stream for urban forestry maintenance. And I think this is really essential, that it has to be dedicated. We got hit very hard during the recession as well, and our tree maintenance funding was the first thing to go down, even as our mayor was still saying, at the time he wanted to plant more trees. And we were saying, who's gonna take care of these trees? We shouldn't be putting them in the ground if we don't have a way to care for them. And so one of the things that I think we did really well in that dedicated funding stream is we planned for the future growth. So I would encourage you, if you're looking at your sustainable funding, what is your end game? What is your full stocking level or your canopy goal, whatever that's going to be, and then make sure that whatever your funding stream is, that it will be there at that end point and not just where you are today. And we learned from colleagues in other places, and I want to give a shout out to the City of Oakland, because they said, don't learn from our mistake and make sure that you're both planning for your future growth and that you're escalating with cost of living. So that's the other thing we built into our dedicated funding stream.
That's great. And we have that with our street lighting. There's been talk over the years about whether we would put, like you're talking about, street lighting and maybe trees together. We went through the whole thing too with the sidewalks, the responsibility of property owners or of the city. Back in the 70s when the feds funded it, we took responsibility, the feds stopped funding it, and we're all stuck with sidewalk deficits as well. So these are really important things to be talking about collectively. We have about 5 minutes left, so I want to kind of throw one last question to all of you before I introduce Adele to come up here and say a few words as well. As you look at trees in the economy, I mentioned how many jobs we were going to create. What sort of, we talk a lot about green jobs. Obviously, everybody's talking about the Green New Deal in Washington. My line is don't look across the aisle in Washington, look across the country, because you'll find people who work in this space. And these are great jobs, by the way, for folks who don't necessarily have college degrees, people who've been involved in the criminal justice system, who've been foster youth, veterans coming home from war, things like that. To what degree are you aligning kind of your tree policy with your job policies to either take care of those who are left behind, to think about the expansion of green jobs based on urban canopies and forestry, and where can we learn from some of the either lessons that mistakes that you've made or some of the victories that you've had? Go, Carl.
I can start this off. So one of the things that we have in San Francisco is a grant program for nonprofit organizations. And many of our nonprofit partners help us with both planting new trees and watering trees and getting them established. But the grants that they receive, even though their focus may be on planting trees or watering trees, they're workforce development grants. And basically, the majority of their funding has to have a workforce development component to it. And so what we're able to do with that is the Friends of the Urban Forest that I mentioned earlier, which is one of our really key nonprofit partners, they have a Green Teens program. So they work with at-risk youth and they train them in young tree care, which includes structural pruning. That was a big conversation at my table this morning, the importance of structural pruning to set those trees up for a good, healthy future and reduce your maintenance costs later on. And then our watering crews have work with formerly incarcerated folks to get them trained in how to water trees. They also do a little bit of young tree care. They do restaking, and they then get the soft skills, the workforce skills that they need to potentially move on to other jobs. So even though we're really focused on the green side of the work, our workforce development program is the major component of all of our grants.
Great. No. Kevin?
Yeah, this is a really important thing that's kind of close to my heart. One of the conversations I had with Tim Tyson today, which I really got to thank him for.
Yeah, special shout out to Tim Tyson, by the way, for our fellowship. Thank you, Tim.
Coincidentally, he climbed his first tree 42 years ago. Okay, and 42 years ago I was born. Okay?
So he was a little ahead of you there.
Yeah, and I climbed my first tree about 26 years ago, and I just realized I'm working with people I'm mentoring right now that are 26 years old, so they were born when at that time, and Tim's seen a lot change since he started. I've seen a lot change since I've started, and a lot more opportunities are there. You can approach this head on with the workforce development program, which is absolutely amazing, but don't overlook incidental things, such as when we make a regulation that says that arborists have to be certified, or that pruning has to be done to a certain standard. Well, somebody has to do it to that standard, and therefore they have to get training, and they have to, and then that creates a situation where you have untrained workers and trained workers, and the trained workers can make a little bit more money and have an incentive to go into that industry and progress and make more money. So in a roundabout way, we're actually helping a lot of the tree companies in our area. And I've had one-on-one discussions with tree companies, and as you said, a lot of them just got into this business because there weren't other opportunities for them, or maybe they just love being outdoors. And they say to me, how is this is going to cost me money to get my guys certified. This is going to, when do I make that money back? How do they ever make that money back? Well, they make it when they get a contract working on trees that requires them to have certification. It allows them to differentiate themselves from their competitors with their qualifications and certifications. And all of that is bettering people's lives. It's bettering our economy. And a lot of it isn't just right up in your face as a statistic, but it all comes together.
Others want to jump in on jobs?
Sure, I will. We have had in Portland something we call Youth Conservation Crew for, about 12 years now, and it's paid summer employment for high school age students in a number of different areas that our bureau, the Parks Bureau, does. One of those is tree crew, and so they learn about establishment care, pruning, some of our regulatory and policy components as well, with an eye towards them then being, when they graduate from high school, good applicants for jobs in our shop or with commercial arboricultural companies in town. I will say one of the gaps we have is because commercial arboriculture means you're doing off-the-ground work that's a lot more dangerous and difficult. We've had a gap that we're still trying to figure out how to fill. We do get some of the licensed graduates hired, but not as many as we'd like to see. There needs to be another step in there. We also have paid internships that we do with various different positions in our organization. We've just been doing that for the last few years, for example, with the Muslim Educational Trust, which is a nonprofit in Portland. And we've seen that pay off pretty well. We've had a couple of those folks come on to work for us just as seasonals so far, so it's a start. But the biggest thing, really, third and last thing, is in our racial equity plan, we have a trainee program specified that's very structured, and it's based on a partnership with a community group, something along the lines of, it's not specified which one, but one of them. The women in trades, for example, arboriculture and forestry are traditionally white and male, and we, especially in our shop, have very few women. So we would be working with them for them to recruit and prepare folks for job readiness, people from their community who are interested, that then come into our shop and work with some external managers and support people for them to work every day with our folks, with a sponsor, a mentor, so that they really be job ready to go out and work for any of the commercial companies in town, or our company as well, company so to speak. So we look at it as that rising tide that lifts all boats. As long as we can get them prepared and out the door, then it really changes the future and makeup of our profession, which is essential. Great.
Jen, Stan, Carla, Kevin, Matt, I want to thank you all for being part of a wonderful panel. Let's give them a round of applause and thank them for being here today. Feel free to stay in our city as long as you need. Spend lots of money while you're here. We'll repay at least for Honolulu a little bit later. We'll be up in San Francisco this summer. Let me now turn to Adel Hajkhalil, who is the head of our Bureau of Street Services. Mentioned he was an assistant general manager in our Bureau of Sanitation, one of the 5 bureaus in our Public Works Department. And really, trees cuts across all of these bureaus for the most part, between engineering and contract administration, our sanitation, our street services, and our street lighting. But he has been a recognized environmental leader, but more importantly, he's a good human leader, which is why it was an easy pick for me to elevate him recently to head up our street services. He has been on a tear already, whether it's testing new materials for lighter and less reflective and less hot pavements, whether it's looking at a more holistic way to look at sidewalks and trees and streets altogether. He is now also leading this fight to reinvigorate urban forestry. So please welcome Adel Hajkhalil, and it's been great to be with you. Thank you so much.